Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sweet Talks. Today we have with us Cameron, who is the founder of KONG. Hi Cameron, thank you so much for being here.
Definitely. Thanks for having me on.
If you can just give us some background information on you and the company.
Yeah, so Kongland is actually a DAO, and I'm a core contributor there. I started my journey into crypto a long time ago when I played with Bitcoin in 2011 and then forgot about it. And at the time, we were doing a company which made smartphone controlled door locks. So you could use your smartphone as a key to access a space. And it's funny how, even though that seems completely distinct from crypto, we were dealing with very similar ideas where we had to keep keys secure, both physical keys and digital keys. So that company didn't have anything to do with crypto until 2016, which is funny that there's now recently this news around the DAO hack because the DAO is what pulled us back into crypto. The creators of the DAO also had their own project called Slockit, and the door locks that we manufactured had a really good open API. And so they approached us and they said, hey, we're making this project called Slockit. You have one of the best open APIs out there. We'd like to use your door locks effectively for a decentralized Airbnb.
Right.
And
Okay.
at the time in 2016, we said, what are you talking about? This is crazy. We barely heard of Ethereum, let alone the DAO. And despite the DAO imploding and Slockit, didn't really continue that long after, it pulled us in to say, this is really fascinating. There's something happening here. And in 2017, we made the decision to sell our door lock company and then switch full time to crypto.
Okay.
So, um,
Actually, maybe you
oh,
want to touch on the DAO hack that you said for people who aren't aware of what's happened.
right, right. So the DAO hack is a really formative moment in the history of Ethereum. So Ethereum as a network had just launched, and one of the first ideas behind Ethereum was because it was much more programmable than Bitcoin. You could do these things by like decentralized autonomous organizations, and you could do them on chain. So there was this forum organized around the DAO, and the DAO was set up by a few different early Ethereum folks as effectively an investment vehicle. And the idea was the DAO was going to raise a bunch of money, and the forum, you could go and propose ideas for investment, and the DAO would invest into your idea. And as a result, if you did well, you'd return tokens to the investors. It was really more of like a giant fund than a DAO. Um, and that was roughly, I think it was around 2016. And what happened very quickly was the DAO collected a massive amount of Ethereum. I mean, it was, a large percentage of the outstanding Ethereum at the time because there were really no other uses for it. And someone discovered a bug in the smart contract they used to collect the Ethereum. And they basically siphoned off a massive portion of the funds within the DAO. And then white hat hackers had to come in and siphon off the rest of the money into another contract. And it led to this early response by the Ethereum Foundation at the time and the core team to decide that they were going to fork Ethereum and effectively refund all of the hacked funds. And that, I would say that was a pretty important moment in early Ethereum days. And so as a result, there's actually Ethereum Classic, which still observes the DAO hack funds. And only recently, in the last few days now, there's a writer who believes that she revealed the identity of the DAO hacker, which I don't think has been proven, but is likely the case.
Right. And after this is when you transitioned into the company of KONG.
Well, not quite directly. So effectively, we started thinking about ideas in 2017. We closed the sale of our last company in early 2018, and we honed in on what crypto hardware existed already, and that was effectively just wallets, so ledgers, Trezors, and so forth. And the way we saw it, there were just many other experiences out in the world, whether door locks or otherwise, where you could start to integrate crypto into the hardware directly,
Mhm.
whether it's for a decentralized Airbnb or a car rental service or simpler things. And we decided to focus on simpler things. So the first thing that we built was called Airtime.
Mhm.
And Airtime was like a predecessor to Apple AirTags, where we were creating a universal crypto network for tracking and tracing things with Bluetooth trackers. And we built most of that product. We were pretty close to completion, but we knew that Apple was coming with AirTags, and we were a little concerned about trying to compete with them on that side of things.
Right.
And also
Did this launch?
the we never launched airtime. No, I shouldn't say that. We did ship out, alpha and beta units to folks, and we got pretty far, but we never publicly launched it in a large scale way. Um, and the other big problem at the time was we needed, this is 2018 Ethereum. We needed massive scalability for doing microtransactions, and
Right.
L2s were proposed, but nothing existed. And so we were basically going to have to run our own chain in order to get the throughput that we needed. And yeah, so it wasn't viable from a few different angles. It was probably too early. But in the process of doing so, one of the things that we realized was if you put items out in the world with crypto locked in them, they become massive targets because a person can just go up to them and attempt to hack the item to retrieve the cryptocurrency. So in the case of airtime, you have these little tags. They have to pay for their own transactions. They contain a small amount of crypto, and someone who's enterprising could go around and just find items and take them apart and extract the crypto if they weren't very secure. And so that led us into a really deep period of research into chips. We had a bit of chip background from our previous company days, from Lockatron, where we'd investigated making custom chips.
Mm-hmm.
We hadn't taken that too far, but that's where we did this really deep dive. And we said, okay, there's this huge problem in the chip industry where you have chips that claim they're secure, but they're self-certified, and you don't really know the security guarantees of these chips. And if we want crypto out there in the world, that depends on private keys and securing private keys. And so we need chips with more transparent guarantees and an understanding of how the chips work. And so that's actually what led us to Kong. Is we did a lot of research. We spoke to a lot of university researchers who do chip hacking, and they take apart chips and they pull the private keys out. And they said, yeah, nobody's spoken to us. This field is incredibly new. It's really neat that you're working on this. But making a chip is a very difficult endeavor. It's millions of dollars. You need lots of demand. You need to prove to people, prove to the market effectively why this chip is useful. And so that was the formation of Kong. We said, well, okay, we're a small group. We don't have huge amounts of money to invest in this. We spoke to a few different groups to see if they were interested in supporting it. But I think, in 2019, the idea of making chips was just above everybody's head. It was like, no, we've got to focus on L2 deployment, not like, let's go make some chips.
Right.
And so we said, well, let's create a demo which demonstrates exactly why the security of the chip is fundamental to crypto. And that demo was KONG Cash. So this is a KONG Cash now. Let's see for the
I have
background.
to put your. There we go.
Yeah. And so KONG Cash is a cash-like instrument. It's like a euro or a dollar or pound. But rather than being backed by a government currency, it's backed by cryptocurrency. And it's a little difficult to see here. Let's see if I can get there we go. You can see the chips there. This has a specialized secure element chip, which is one of the few out there available, wherein all the guarantees come from a hardware level, not a software level. So it means that the chip is not upgradable. You can't change any of the functions. And that just limits the attack surface where hackers could come in and try to break into the chip and steal the private keys.
Right. But what's the what is it linked to though? When you're saying
So
cryptocurrency, like, do you choose your own? For example, if you have multiple in your wallet, do you choose which one that you link it to?
so KONG Cash was a top to bottom project in like creating a currency. So we created a Kong ERC20, which actually gets minted onto each note. We created, a culture behind the cash, because cash, actually represents a lot of things for people. It has imagery of typically the country that it's from. We did a lot of research on the psychology of cash, but so Kong Cash wasn't designed to be like a generic product, like, oh, let's go sell this so people can put Ethereum on it. We actually wanted to really demo, what a non-state currency looked like.
Right. Okay. So it's its own currency, basically.
It's its own currency.
Right.
Um, and so we made about 10,000 of these notes, and we handed them out at some of them at DevCon, the last one, DevCon Osaka in 2019. And it was funny how the first day handing them out, I think a lot of people were just very perplexed. They're like, well, wait a second, cryptocurrency is about being digital. Why did you make this physical form? Physical forms only slow us down. What is the sense in doing that? Um, and by the last day of Osaka, there are like people swarming us to try and get them, because I think that intuitively they understood that the vehicle of cash is understandable by everyone. Whether you're 90 years old or 5 years old, how cash works. It's immediately available to you, and it closes one of these huge gaps that cryptocurrencies have had in terms of understanding. Because while everybody has heard of Bitcoin, very few people have actually transacted in it.
Right.
And so that's kind of the big tool that we see of like demonstrating physical crypto cash is the secure chips have this locked value on them, but also we can create a hardware form that's intuitive to anyone.
Okay. And so is it literally just one node, and each one you can change the value of, or is it different designs for different values?
Yeah, I'll see if I don't know if I have other Kong notes, but we made a full set of notes ranging from 1 to 500, and
Okay.
each one has a unique design and it's a fixed value. So um, it works the same way that cash works, in the sense that you receive a 100 euro note, and that note is worth 100 euros when you take it to the bank.
Mm.
Kong Cash notes are preloaded up to their face value. They're not like a gift card where you can spend small amounts off of it. They have a time lock on the smart contracts. So up until a certain date in the future, which is now finally approaching us, we set it to 2022 or October 2022, which in 2019 seemed far away, but it's going to finally come pretty soon. Up until that date, you can only spend a Kong Cash note like cash. So you can put it in a safe under your mattress, spend it, burn it, but the digital portion is only verifiable, and locked in the smart contract. And after that date, you can actually take the note and claim the digital off of it. But it's not like it's not like a credit card or a prepaid card where you can start to spend portions of it over time.
Right. So what issue are you trying to fix? For example, rather than just saying the future is only digital, right? It's only like, for example, having cryptos engraved in our phones and in every device we have. Why did you guys come up with this phygital, if you will?
Yeah, the the notion of Kong is really radically changing the user experience of crypto assets. I think that for us, is really important from a broad distribution standpoint. So from the idea that, well, stepping back. So as I mentioned, I played around with Bitcoin a long time ago, forgotten about it, and it's one of those things where I think back to, if there was a Bitcoin instrument in 2011 that people could hand out really easily, would that have changed the distribution of Bitcoin? Would it have meant that there were, fewer Bitcoin whales and more people today who have a small portion of it?
Right.
And so I think that accessibility standpoint is like one of the biggest things that we think is critical to making crypto mainstream, so that everybody can easily access it, even if they don't understand what a private key is.
Right.
And more importantly, they can access it in a non-custodial way versus going on to, an exchange which has its own risks.
Right. Yeah, and I can see that too. How it can help onboard people who might not be necessarily, into cryptos at the moment, and spread this movement. But in your mind, say, you're helping all these people be onboarded in cryptos, and for now, in your mind, in the future, how do you envision, currency exchanges? Do you think it's going to be only digital? Do you think it's going to be a merger of both?
Yeah, I think that's an important question of like, does physical currency go away? So I did have the opportunity right at the beginning of COVID in 2020 to go to a currency printers conference. So we had just launched Kong, And I reached out and I said, we have this really novel cash, like, can I come speak to central banks about it? And they said, this is crazy. Sure. And so I went to this sort of invite only conference where it was central banks and money printers. And it was really fascinating to learn about, there's this existential threat to the money printing business because cash usage is declining in many places. But even that said, cash is still used many parts of the world as the primary means of transactions. Maybe not for high value ones, but just day to day, cash is still primary. And so I think that, even if we imagine a perfect world where everybody has a cryptocurrency wallet and they understand how to use it, cash is still important in terms of imbuing an identity to money. So this is my point about Bitcoin and Ethereum. There is no identity to Bitcoin and Ethereum, as a cash instrument. It has identity in terms of like Moon or the world computer, but when you think of state money, you think of the identity of that and how you can spend it and the recognition. And so I think that even for any cryptocurrency in the future that's ubiquitous and used for transactions, having a small amount in a physical form is actually really important to create that psychological link so that kids can learn how to use it, so that people can save it in a form which is away from their computers and smartphones. I think there is a use case. Do I think it's the primary way in which we store crypto? Probably not. But I do think that it likely will stick around longer than anybody realizes.
Right. Okay. Do you want to get into a bit of the technical side of CeeLo and the chip and what it does? Because I've seen the specific webpage you have about it. So maybe you can give us some more information about that.
Yeah. So when we created Kong, we we designed kind of the technical specification of, okay, here's how you have the specialized secure element chip, and it generates a key pair, like a cryptographic key pair, like any wallet. And we take the public portion of that and we store it on chain. And then we have a smart contract which escrows the Kong token. And so, that might be a little bit technical, but from a high level, you're basically saying, here's a public key and here's the asset associated with it. And we realize that obviously we can generalize the Kong Cash example. So it's not just an ERC20 fungible token, but also, a 721 or an 1155 or whatever token you want, you could escrow against the chip.
Right.
And so we came up with a generic term for that, which is the superset, I guess, if you will, of these kinds of devices is a silo, a silicon locked contract. And so by silicon, it means that the chip at a silicon level is generating the private public key information, which is locking the asset. And locked implies that the digital asset is somehow attached to the physical for some period of time. And that locking, we believe, is important because if you don't want to have a locked asset, you may as well just distribute QR codes. That they work perfectly well. You can distribute private keys on QR codes. The asset's not locked, but that's fine. Maybe you just want to distribute an NFT quickly once and the person scratches it off and pulls it off. The locking is important to create an identity between the physical and the digital that lasts for a while. And so hence the name Silicon Locked. And recently, we've started to generalize that further due to the chip shortage to something we're calling halos, which is hardware locked. And the distinction there is you don't get quite the same security of a silicon guarantee because there might be some software involved in the key generation. But I can explain a little bit later on why we kind of like landed on having to have halos as well as silos.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, this concept of bridging the digital and the physical is fascinating for me. Especially with Rare Candy, I know our teams are in the talks of trying to implement some of your technology with fashion wearables. That's something that we really want to get into, and we have, to a degree already. But what you're doing is just taking it to that next level, having that chip inside. And, if I'm not mistaken, somebody from my team told me that can also work as like an offline wallet. Is that
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So So from KONG Cash, we had a few people who started to reach out to us. Silos were just theoretical. We actually hadn't created any yet. And they said, the KONG Cash is cool, but I want to put this tech into my merch, or I want to use this tech to authenticate collectibles.
Right.
And so we took the chip component here of KONG Cash, and we created a small little tag version of it. And that was the first generation silo chip. And so creators started to embed it into items and then associate NFTs or just even general smart contracts with the chips. And yeah, really bridge beyond the currency physical digital to anything physical digital, which is our long-term goal now.
Right. And in terms of you speaking about your long-term goal, how is that being impacted by the silicon, the chip shortage? I want to get into that.
Yeah, the chip shortage has been incredibly rough for us. I think, for example, we were sourcing chips in 2020 where we managed to get a few sets of them through the end of the year. And then we were waiting for the next set in early 2021, and the ship date kept on pushing out and pushing out. And I currently still have an open order for a set of chips that we used on the silos, which we're already, more a year in, and they're supposedly going to arrive later this year, but who knows? So that was one challenge, and as a result, we had to start buying chips on the secondary market. So whereas we had a couple dollars worth of chips before, the price shot up to manufacture one minimum 5x, but I think at the worst 8 or 9x. So the cost of an individual silo chip just went up massively. But I'd say that the silver lining is that it forced us to think through and diversify our approach to chips. So ultimately, as I mentioned, we do want to create an open initiative, either with us or other projects, to create silicon, which is open source and available for anyone in the cryptocurrency space. That's a costly endeavor. However, we realized that we should, open up to any existing chip manufacturer who wants to make these secure chips. And so we started actually searching out and seeing what kind of substitutes we could find. And we've now landed on one chip where the supply is a little bit more stable, and we can get a few more, and we have more optionality. But still, even day to day, it's tricky. I have suppliers saying, "Oh, you better buy now because either the price is going up or we won't be able to get these for 6 months again." So it's unfortunately, I'd like to say that it's easing up, but the chip shortage is actually just continuing to get worse.
Right. And that's a pity because everything you do, I guess, is the core of it is the chip, right?
Right.
So unless you have the chip, you can't really do all these things that you planned. Because I'm
Yeah.
even seeing the next topic I want to talk about is the citizenship thing that you have, the passport. So, and I guess even that is powered by the chip, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So this is one of the Kongland passports here. It looks like a credit card, but in fact is not a credit card, and it has the chip on the back here, under some meteorite dust we've embedded in a sealant. But yeah, the chips are core to everything that we work on at Kongland.
Right.
And yeah,
What,
it's tricky when you can't source them.
of course. And what are you trying to achieve with the passport? What's going on with that project?
Yeah. So when we started to have folks reach out to us for silos, it was just such a massive variety in terms of the use cases, like ones we would never predict before. Like, yes, there was physical art, and yes, the merch use case made sense. But after that, we started to get all of these use cases where we we thought, okay, like running a single project to say, here's the chips and here's their purpose, kind of like Concash, didn't make sense anymore. That we needed to open up usage of the chips for all sorts of things. And so last summer, we announced KONG Land, which is taking the project, which previously had been sort of this company that evolved out of the KONG Cash side of things, and creating a DAO out of it. And the structure of the DAO we say is a crypto state. The idea that we have, Kongland has cash. Now we're making passports for the citizens of Kongland. And we have all these hallmarks of a country, so why not declare that we are one? And that we're open for any creators who want to come make physical goods using the chips, physical crypto goods, and that we want to foster development around, let's take crypto out of purely digital forms and experiment with all these other ideas. And that's gone even further, where there's definitely citizens who want to set up physical locations where we manufacture chips and embed them, and create sub DAOs with different functions within the crypto state.
Right. So I guess you can even use this for gated events, um, such as like social tokens, holding some social tokens, going into certain areas. I guess you could do the same with this passport. I think you do it for your own Discord, I believe, but maybe there's a wider appeal to it as well.
Yeah. So we're working with other projects who I think are using our chips or their own passports that we've helped to manufacture for them, and they're probably going to experiment more with this before we do. But token gated events is the main obvious one, or maybe not so much token gated, but um, token revealing events where you attending event, you tap the card and it's shown, what your NFT is, your PFP. And so every Kongland citizen receives a PFP along with the physical card. So I think that's definitely an interesting use case. You could start to use it transactionally, where you can effectively use it as a wallet to spend in some places at those events. But other projects are actually experimenting with truly gaining access to either co-working spaces or living spaces using the passports.
Physical.
So true. Yeah, right. Physical co-working and physical living spaces. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So for me, I come onto this website, and I'm fascinated by this. Um, how can I become a citizen? What's the process?
Right. So right now, the only way to do that is via the Citizen Alpha token. So uh, going back to when we announced this at ECC last summer, we decided to create 500 Citizen Alpha tokens. And we didn't really honestly think there was going to be much demand for it. We thought a few people might be interested in hardware. And so we priced them at around, I think it was between $50 and $200 in ETH. And then they all were very quickly bought up. So I think we were a bit naive about the demand there was for it. So today, Citizen Alpha is a little bit expensive. It's a couple of ETH to participate. But we are working on other versions of citizenship, which are more accessible for creators to come join. And also, we welcome creators who are not citizens to come use the chips as well. But I would say citizenship buys you participation in the crypto state, and it also lets you have some, help in directing this chip initiative that we're working on.
Right. If you're open to it, I would like to discuss maybe some more generic topics such as decentralization, and maybe you can tell me what that means to you.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so it's really interesting with decentralization, because I think that that's a topic which has been around for a long time, but all the tooling was so rough for so long that it was like that's a nice idea, but the reality of it is you can't build it that way. Um, so so and by my impression of decentralization, it means that we're removing these centralized parties which effectively act as custodians. They're custodians for our data, custodians for our streams. If they leave the system, we can no longer participate in the system. So if Google goes down, we can no longer search. If Twitter goes down, we can no longer read news from around the world. And so those are centralized systems. And decentralized implies some level by which either there's federated systems in which some parties are sharing responsibility, and they're somewhat centralized, but some can go down and the system still survives. Or you have truly completely decentralized, where every entity is participating in the network as a node, and they are syncing up all the data from all the other nodes. And so I think that true decentralization is very hard to achieve. There have been some great projects that are trying to get individuals to run Ethereum nodes, so that everybody participates in the network. And I think that's a really important exercise. I also think realistically that that's tough for some people for whatever their circumstances are to host that. And so we need, the nice thing about even partial decentralization is having this mix of options. So if Infura or Alchemy go down, you can still connect to other nodes to the network to access the data from Ethereum. And now it's finally becoming possible that the tooling is good enough to actually build that kind of decentralization. And we've thought a lot about that in terms of our own systems and how we even store NFT data. It's like a huge discussion. Like, you create an IPFS hash, but you don't pin it and it goes away. You know, that's an ongoing topic, which I think is really fascinating.
Right. And how do you envision the future in terms of, do you think it's going to be, decentralized with some centralization? Do you think it's going to be one more than the other? Do you think it's going to be only one? How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my hope is that it's a continuing trend towards further decentralization, which I believe means further resiliency. I think that there's a lot of regulatory pressure against decentralization because governments can't control those systems. So, the perfect example are DEXs, where people can go trade like Uniswap and SushiSwap.
Right.
Like, regulators don't like those because it's much harder for them to control it. And yeah, so I could imagine that a regulated DEX comes along and tries to siphon that off. But I think that decentralization is almost too far along, that at a certain point, the governments will have to turn off the internet in order to stop it. And I think that speaks to the resiliency of the networks that we have today, and further ongoing decentralization.
How big of a possibility do you think that is, turning off the internet?
Um, I think if you asked me this question 5 years ago, I would have said not at all. I think today, we're already seeing countries that are sectioning off their own internet. Even before all the recent incidents, Russia demonstrated this several times, where they went through testing to shut themselves off from the rest of the internet. So I think we're going to see it at a country level first. Um, I don't think it's realistic within countries to shut off the internet because so many of our infrastructure and services rely on it. Everybody needs that communication infrastructure. But I do think you'll get situations where you have a bunch of crypto miners or nodes operating in one part of the world, and for other nodes, it's very difficult to maintain sync with them. Um, and there are crazy satellite projects that are trying to break this. So, I know Bitcoin has done a lot of early work on this, on actually having, blockstream satellites that allow for sync anywhere in the world.
Do you think if something like this happens, that people will flock into kind of Web3 and, um, you know, try and work with that and be part of that, or do you think it's just going to go downhill and that Web3 will essentially become Web2, more centralized?
um, I think that, you know, there will always be sort of a centralizing push in Web3, even not for government or regulatory reasons, but just for optimization. There's all these debates right now over Alchemy and Infura that, without them, you can't use a dApps, which I don't believe is true because we've run multiple dApps prior to Alchemy and Infura. Like, we've been around long enough that we've run them with our own nodes. So I think that, like, the argument that they are Ethereum is incorrect. But I do think there is this sort of centralizing that occurs. The point is, in my mind, when does that centralization become a threat to the network? When does Alchemy or Infura become problematic? And it becomes problematic only when you turn off these nodes and it's impossible to transact. And I think what's fascinating, backing up for a second, is we all are aware of dApps and front ends, and we can use Uniswap or SushiSwap on their websites. But people are already becoming more and more skilled about going to Etherscan and calling contract calls directly. And I think, like, as a result, the technical savviness of Ethereum users is going up because they've seen cases where Uniswap said, well, we can't have this front end in this place, or we can't show you this asset. We have a list of banned assets. And users want to trade those assets. And the Sushi swap pools exist. So I'm encouraged that as things are shut off, users users naturally want to use the functions, and they're going to continue to use the functions, which speaks to decentralization sticking around.
Right. And so what excites you about this kind of technology, this, the blockchain and decentralization? Because there's a lot of things that, both the companies we're involved with, we couldn't do what we do if this technology didn't exist. So I wanted to know about you and what excites you about this.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of pieces, but fundamentally, I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist, but I fundamentally believe that the narrative from the early Bitcoin days of non-state money is actually really, really important. I think that in a lot of places you have completely innocent people, especially in the US, where their assets are seized because they might be committing crimes, when in reality they're driving around, with $50,000 in cash because they like to handle cash, they trust it, and the government just takes their money. Like, it's lawful for the government to do that. And I think that's one of the most offensive things. And I think we've seen time and time again that governments use this power to really terrible effects. So I think that the power of individuals being able to memorize a seed phrase and hold their own crypto is absolutely incredible. It's something the world has never seen before, and which is ironic that we make physical, but my belief is on the digital side. And so my thought on in terms of the physical is we need to distribute this incredible technology to everyone, because I believe now, especially with the recent events, that governments are going to try to use the financial system to exert even more control on individuals. CBDCs CBDCs are terrifying because they effectively will allow governments to turn off money for certain purposes. Governments could say, oh, you shouldn't buy that soda this month, it's too sugary for you, you can't spend your money on that, it's not your money anymore. So I do sort of believe in that perspective. And then I believe that the second order effects through Ethereum and the world computer mean that we can start to apply this to not just money, but all these other important digital parts of our lives. So one of the most interesting ideas I've heard is that, there's this field of cybernetics, which has been around for decades. And the idea is kind of like, originally we would be attached to computers, like computers would start to be in us, and maybe that'll come. But recent cybernetics research has basically concluded that people with iPhones, that's a cybernetic interaction. We're so attached to our computers and our data. And, whether one says that's right or wrong or good or bad, the truth of the matter is that data is all mediated by these centralized parties. And so I think the next step from controlling your own money is this ownership of your own data and your own destiny through Web3 is also absolutely critical. That, through my key material, I should be able to generate messages on a decentralized Twitter, which you can authenticate, and that I'm the one who sent it from that key at that time. And also, I can also opt of participating out of the system. I can do crazy different encryption techniques, so only some people can read my data and others can't. I think that's all really important, giving people ownership over things that they thought they owned.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think empowerment and ownership are key words when we're talking about the future and what Web3 can do for people. I know that a lot of people who are not crypto natives and are not in the Web3 scene, me personally, I'm still very new to this Web3 scene. People are seeing it through NFTs. That's the way that they're
Yeah.
coming into it. But I think, with Rare Candy as well, we're trying to find all these different ways that we can utilize the NFT technology. It doesn't just have to be like people are looking at, pictures of cats and they're thinking that this is an NFT, but essentially it's the smart contract behind it and what you can really do with the technology, which is exciting, and what it can actually have many use cases. So for now, maybe it's just about art, but how would you see the future of NFTs and this technology evolving?
Yeah. It's funny. It's almost as if all of this has been written down, and we just need to go back to the instructions to see where it'll go. But if you read the ERC 721 spec, it's laid out very clearly. It describes the NFT as a deed of ownership. So in the same way that you buy a house and you have a deed, an NFT is a digital deed of ownership. And the moment that you start to step back from art and JPEGs, which I think is actually really important to bring people in, but the moment you start to zoom out, for a deed of ownership as a simplistic concept, that just encapsulates everything around us. Whether large or small. People think of houses and cars, but all of a sudden with crypto, we can have these deeds of ownership for smaller things. And maybe it's not about the fact that you own it, but the nature of the ownership, that you can trace it over time across owners from the creator, and that there are ways that you can then remix that ownership via contracts through DeFi or in combining ownership with other objects. Like all sorts of experimentation can come from that. And I think that's the really exciting part. So like concretely, what does that mean for like NFTs? Yeah, I think the idea of buying a house as an NFT, like there's already been, a couple examples of people playing with that, and I think that'll continue. But I think that it could radically change all sorts of transactions in our daily life. That they NFTs, the NFT is kind of a technical term, which may just go into the background, and it's like, yeah, you're just buying something, and obviously it's an NFT behind the scenes.
Right. Yeah. And I think it could help out a lot of situations in terms of, uh, making things automatic with things that don't have to necessarily have people over them and wasting time. Like even me right now, I'm in Greece. I don't know if you know much about the government and, how society here works, but essentially it's one of those countries that, like you mentioned, still uses paper money, as a main form of currency to for exchanging goods and whatnot. And until the pandemic, everything was very much you have to go physically sign papers. There was all this kind of procedure that was very long. Now things are starting to move into the digital space, and before this, I would have never seen Greece scanning QR codes. That wasn't engraved in us. That wasn't
Yeah.
something I've seen. Um, and I think that when governments can implement all these technologies, it can be very beneficial. It can also be utilized in the wrong way, but I guess that's like with everything, right? Um, Now, I don't want to keep you too long. I know you're busy, but before we've kind of finished, maybe we can talk about some future goals that you have for Kong, some future aspirations, or maybe some challenges that you want to take on for the future.
Yeah, I'd say that as I mentioned, this chip initiative is a project of ours that we've thought about for a long time, and I think that one of the initiatives that we're working on, so we're calling it ERS, or Ethereum Reality Service. We just teased a little bit about it at ETH Denver. Is this idea that if you have physical crypto assets, it's really, really important that you understand the nature of the chip and the guarantees of the chip. So, for instance, you could use a really low cost NFC chip and put it into merchandise. And if it's high end merchandise, there's an incentive to copy that chip. And there's some great examples of some early projects from a few years ago who use these cheap chips. And then someone said, look, I've just copied this antisocial social club t-shirt because I could copy the tag. And so it made it easier actually for them to counterfeit it because with their fake. So we think it's really important to think about the nature of chips. It may sound kind of weird. You're like, well, that sounds really technical. Why do chips matter? And so we want through ERS to sort of distill it down to, okay, you can scan something, you can interact with it, you can understand, this probably has pretty good guarantees around the crypto side of it, or maybe somewhat weaker guarantees. And we think there can be incentives around that. And so that initiative is something we're really excited for, and we want to reach out to other projects, whether they make chips, whether they like the EF, they just make blockchains, to think through how we can do this strong linking between physical and digital.
Sweet. Well, I wish you guys all the best of luck with your future endeavors. And, I know we have some things in the works as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. It means a lot to me and the whole team. Thank you guys for watching. If there's anything you guys want to, stay up to date with all things NFT and cryptos, you can join our Discord. I'm going to have all the links for Cameron below. Again, Cameron, thank you so much. If you have any last words,
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
thanks so much. Peace.
Bye-bye.